our social relations and our constitution and our democracy. It's still a question that we need to ask. He didn't agree with Marx. He felt Marx was wrong to say the whole thing could be based on a materialist understanding of history. Leroux was a pantheist, a mystic, an esotericist. He was a Freemason. He'd studied Kabbalah, he'd studied Buddhism, he'd studied Pythagorean classical philosophy. He was a polymath like me. And he believed that ultimately spirit is attracting humanity towards wisdom. He said in his writings, we gravitate towards God, which is something Teilhard de Chardin could have said. And that's like an evolutionary idealism, if you want, which I believe in. He was a feminist before his time and a revolutionary pacifist. He didn't believe in violence. You can't get peace by using violence, but you can get peace by enlightenment, by this common mutual gravitation towards God. He believed that there's a trinity behind existence. Man is sensation, sentiment, and intellect all at once in varying proportions. A bit like Jung's ideal, although he had a fourth element. And social harmony comes when this triad is functioning in sympathetic harmony. This is a very druidical idea, and I'm sure Leroux was familiar with the Druid teachings and so on, to some extent. He was critical of modern society in which millionaires and capitalists have usurped power and become the nobles of our time. Well, isn't that what's happened in Brexit? These people, these ultra-rich millionaires, have stolen our rights as citizens throughout Europe, as citizens throughout Britain, to come and live and work and study and teach in any European country we want. They're trying to shackle us with their own superpower ability to drive their yachts and jets around wherever they want, and we have to stay stuck in our little villages like serfs, as we were in the medieval times. No, sorry folks, we're not going back into the village system. We've moved a long way since then. Leroux was also critical of the wage system itself, which allotted to the workers less than half of the revenue from their labour. Now this is the point Das Kapital goes on about. Marx analysed that one to death. I'm doing a commentary on Das Kapital at the moment because I honour Marx's polymathic genius. But I think Leroux was a deeper and a better thinker. Just Marx, had the right contacts to promote his work, sadly, and poor old Leroux didn't. And he also felt that the family was problematic. The way that men could own women and marriage was like slavery for life and so on. He believed as a feminist that men and women should be free and equal to fall in love and have that wonderful experience of love on equal terms. And he was way ahead of the times in that. That's why he got on so well with George Sand, who also felt the same as a strong woman in her own right. And he felt that in his 7 discourses on the situation of society and the human condition in 1841, what a great title, 7 discours sur la situation actuelle de la société et de l'esprit humain, 1841. Love it. He wrote, the role of society is to give to all its members, to each according to his needs, his capacity and his works, the enjoyment of the product of the common labour, whether such labour be an idea, a work of art, or material prosperity. End of quotes. I mean, thank you, Pierre, thank you, the Mayor of Boussac. This is what we still haven't got in our society. At least the European Union and the European countries are trying, with their Charter of Fundamental Rights and so on, to ensure that people have rights to pensions and disability help and unemployment help, and that society isn't a dog-eat-dog world of Ayn Rand where everybody's chopping everybody up and cannibalising everybody, and the only people that have got money are the lawyers and the military surveillance people. No, Leroux wanted a society based on equality, fraternity, liberty, but also intelligence, right? And so does the European Union, so does France. still. And so does Britain, actually. That's what we really want. It's just the elites who've dominated the media sphere have tried to brainwash into making us think we're all competitive animals fighting each other, and trying to revive ancient nationalist hatreds like, we hate the Scots, we hate the Irish, we hate the Welsh. Nonsense. So Leroux was the first to ever use the term socialist and to analyse the concept. At the same time, Robert Owen was doing this in Wales, from Welshpool, where I used to live and teach. And Robert Owen was the equivalent to Pierre Leroux. Robert was also a mystic and a spiritualist, and eventually ended up kind of giving up on economics. He thought the whole system was so corrupt, he ended up, realising we have to start in the heaven worlds and work down as well. And he influenced the Spiritualist Union that's active in the British Isles. But he was a great thinker, Robert Owen, in his own way, and very compatible with Pierre Leroux. So now there's another thinker I want to salute his work today, another sage, who happened to be my local chap. And I discovered just this week there's a park in his memory in Boussac. I took some photographs, I'll post them on my Facebook wall. And around the base, there's liberty, equality, fraternity, and so on. So if we put intelligence into this quest for liberty, equality, fraternity, I don't think Brexit would figure high in its annals. I think it would fail the exam, basically. It doesn't do well on the equality thing. It's about inequalities, Brexit. It doesn't do well on the liberty thing because it's blocking our liberty and cobbling our freedom of movement and stuff. It doesn't do well on fraternity because it's making us no friends in Europe. Britain has become the laughing stock because it's sort of demonised Europe to ratchet up the rhetoric of we hate the Germans, we hate the French, kind of nonsense. And it doesn't do very well on intelligence either because it's just obviously so stupid because it's going to lead to the breakup of the UK, lead to more and more companies pulling out of Britain. London, will revert back to a series of villages. Or it'll become Americanized and it'll all become like an offshore island of the USA, colonized literally by Boris Johnson and his American cronies, like this girlfriend that he's been flirting with, the American woman. He's obviously been in love with her, or lust, and really selling out Britain to her as a kind of love offering. And he himself was an American citizen up until quite recently. I mean, Boris Johnson is an American plot against the integrity and intelligence of the United Kingdom. I don't think constitutionally it should be permitted that somebody like that should be in power, who's pursuing policies great for the USA, or the hard right that has hijacked the USA, but not great for the ordinary American peoples, the decent people that look to Bernie Sanders or Marianne Williamson for their guide, the Democrats, if you want. Not for the normal, ordinary people of America. Just for the kind of elite conspiratorialists like Steve Bannon, who are fighting war games, basically, and don't care how many bodies they trample to get their little Brexit victories and their hard right achievements of neo-fascism. Well, no, I'm saying, sorry, with Pierre Leroux, with the liberal democrat, social democrat tradition of European mainstream thought and British mainstream thought, I'm saying enough is enough. Stop that. In the name of the universalism of the Zohar, in the name of the universalism of Michael Scott, in the name of authentic intellectuals throughout Europe and the world, this has to be stopped. How? Well, that's why I set up a Centre for Bremain Studies. The theory is if we look at the opposite, if we look at Bremain as a positive thing, if we study that, then we build up arguments that make it obvious that Brexit is a stupid nonsense. And I published a 2-volume work about that recently. I've also set out recently the campaign against political lying because, I've realised some time ago that we'll never get reforms in political life effectively through until we can abolish lying as a practice in parliamentary assemblies. As long as they're allowed to lie in Congress and Parliament and the Senate and all the fora of politicians around the planet, they'll go on doing so, because people think that lying is a good way to achieve advancement. And so they do it. And it works for a little while, but ultimately it ends in moral catastrophe. Hitler lied and lied and lied to the German people. We hate the Jews, they're evil. It brought about ultimately the destruction of Germany, and the destruction of a lot of Europe, and the destruction of the Jews and other minorities, Slavs, Gypsies, homosexuals, etc. That all came from his lies, which were unstopped at the time. Farage, Johnson, these are peddlers of lies, Steve Bannon. They need to be called out. And so that's why I'm proposing the campaign against political lying, which is to make lying actually illegal in Parliament. You can't stop them doing it in the press. I mean, one would wish, but you can stop buying the stuff. You can boycott things like the Telegraph as long as they keep pushing Brexit. Just don't buy it. But make it unlawful to lie in Parliament. And if you're lying, you immediately are sacked as a parliamentarian, Lord or an MP. And the same in the US, the same in Israel, the same in India, in France, in the European Parliament, and so on. That's a project. You can look it up. We have a website. I've even gone to the courtesy of writing a draft bill suitable for the English legal system. The problem with some of the leaders around today, like Boris Johnson, like Trump, like Netanyahu, like Erdogan, like the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Salman guy that advocates chopping up his opponents, is they're all liars. This is a struggle between truth, as Nietzsche said. Metapolitics is the struggle between truth and lies, and that's what I'm practicing as a philosopher. We won't win unless we get them declared illegal, these lies. It's very simple. Read my bill, can be done. We need to make truth-telling the norm in Parliament, in the European Parliament, in all the different parliamentary assemblies. And I welcome, politicians getting in touch with me, how we can draft this suitable for Iceland or the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh Assembly or whatever. Now, some people have said to me, "Oh, Thomas, you can't do that. All politicians lie. Parliament would be emptied." Well, I say, well, thank God for that. Get rid of the liars, and then a whole new crop would come in of truth-tellers. There's plenty of new kids on the block. They're coming out of universities with their degrees in political science and so on, and ethics and philosophy, and PPEs from Oxford. Give them a chance. The corrupt old lot that have been so inured to lying over the centuries, they can go and, write their memoirs or something. I don't know what they do. Okay, another extension of that is the idea then, so how do you regulate it? Well, maybe what we have to do is think about a licenseship for politicians, that you get to practice as a politician like a doctor or a teacher. I was very conscious when I was teaching in schools how how difficult it is to qualify as a teacher, and then you're constantly vetted, you're constantly security checked, you're constantly monitored for everything you do in the classroom all the time. I think I was a good teacher, I think I am a good teacher, but gosh, it was incredibly impertinent to have inspectors sent by the government to tell me, a scholar who spent 30 years studying, how to teach or not, and what I can say and can't say. And I kind of resented it because I realised that this is a racket. The pyramid of inspectors that are weighing down the academics and genuine educators who teach for love because they have a passion for truth, which is where I'm coming from. We're weighed down by this army of monotonous bureaucratic non-entities who come in and say, oh, you haven't done Schedule 4 of tick box 3 of line 33, so we're going to fail this lesson. I mean, it was such a nightmare, right? And the people that are then monitoring those guys and monitoring the guys that monitor those guys are the MPs. And yet who monitors the MPs? Nobody. So the whole system is awash with corruption and non-accountability. Because by the time you take the line of command up to the MPs, they're all lying, right? Now, that is not a way to run an ethical society. That's a way to get chaos, like Brexit and food banks and poverty. and my nephew telling me that, you know, kids in his son's school can't afford to eat because they're that poor. You know, that's where you get to when ethics breaks down in our society, and we have foreign home ministers quoting Ayn Rand. I mean, what kind of a nightmare are we living through? You know, it's like a sort of comic book nightmare. Well, sorry, not good enough. So the answer probably has got to be something like a licensing system for politicians, just as they do for teachers. So, and one of the criteria that would fail your license, it would be taken away from you. Like, if you're a medical doctor and you cut up patients, not for surgery, but just for fun, to practice cutting them up, you'd be struck off the register, right? You'd be sacked as a doctor the day it was found out. And occasionally, maverick doctors are discovered that do this kind of horrendous stuff. Pathologues. Well, Brexit is a pathological madness done by politicians exactly as bad. It's cutting up a country, breaking up Ireland, Scotland, UK, you know, Europe. It's cutting it up like a pathological politician bunch of crazies gone mad, you know. And part of madness is unfeelingness. So Priti Patel recently laughs when you say, what about the damage Brexit's going to cause people? She laughs. Now, this is the sign of a sociopath. They're so, you know, disinvested in people's actual feelings, hidden in their little power bubble, that they've lost the capacity for emotional compassion. That's what pathological doctors do. Now, what you do with these people, if they're medical doctors, is you take away their license to practice. We should do the same with politicians. I know it sounds a bit weird, and, you know, it sounds a bit, what? No, we want democracy. But no, this is just ensuring that the people that get to be MPs have a proper qualification. They've passed a rigorous test. You know, like as a doctor, you have to know about medicine. As a teacher, I have to know about my subject, which is comparative philosophy and religious studies and history. As a politician, you should know about politics. You should know about right and wrong. You should know about morality. You should know about ethical consequences of choices. You should know about the democratic system, how it works. You should know about the constitution. And you should know about the checks and balances on power. This would weed out the fanatics who would write, you know, in answer to everything, we love Hitler, or we hate Jews, you know. Weed those guys out. People like Nigel Farage would not pass those tests. Boris Johnson would not be qualified with a license to be a politician. Right, so then we come to the reality. What's going to happen in the next few days? Tomorrow, Parliament's going to be recalled. And the Queen is going to give a speech. It's going to be a pageant. I pity the Queen, actually. I mean, I respect greatly the Queen, and I think it's disgraceful the way Boris Johnson is hijacking her to use for a party political broadcast. Unbelievably wrong. She probably would say she has no choice. She has to go along with it. So she's going to be making a party political broadcast for the Conservative Party. I think you should read between the lines, you know. If she's wearing a hat which has got any kind of gold stars in it, then that's a bit of a sign. I don't think the Queen is a very happy bunny at the moment because she was lied to, and this whole facade is going to be a nonsense. What Johnson is trying to do is sort of, you know, brain dead magic the people to think, well, the Queen, yeah, that's what she said, we better do what we've got to do, you know, let's just get on and be sheep. Well, no, I think there's a few intelligent people left in Parliament. And what's going to happen in the debate on the Queen's speech, and perhaps next Saturday, next weekend, is I think Boris Johnson will have to be voted out of office. There's a majority against him. He hasn't brought there is no deal that he can put before the British Parliament that they could agree to that will make Brexit work. It's a non-starter. It can't work. And although his propaganda machine has been cranked up to say, yeah, we've got deals with Ireland, it's not happening. It's not happening. And the European politicians are too intelligent to fall for this nonsense. It's the rhetoric of hot air. And I think that enough sensible politicians, the entire, all but one or two of the Labour Party, all the Liberal Democrats, all the SNP, all the Plaid Cymru, all the other dissident and progressive and intelligent politicians, a lot of the Tories themselves are going to look at with horror what Boris Johnson is trying to do, which will then be to push us towards a hard Brexit. There will come a vote. I believe the moderates, the intelligent people that believe in liberty, equality, fraternity and intelligence will come together and vote this man out of office. He will resign. He will be forced out of office. And then there's a 14-day period when they have to come together and find an alternative candidate. Jeremy Corbyn has said today in the press, the Sunday Times, that he would be prepared to step aside. He realises he wouldn't win that vote. I mean, that's all the Lib Dems have been saying. You can't win it. I mean, let him try. It'd be great. I don't have a problem with Jeremy Corbyn becoming caretaker Prime Minister of a government of national unity. I'd love it. I feel really sorry for the man. He's been ridiculed, humiliated, hounded by Theresa May and now Boris Johnson at a level of rudeness that I've never seen in British politics in my lifetime. The poor man, I'd love to see him Prime Minister, at least for the time, of calling a second referendum, because that's what I think should then happen. But I don't think he'll get the votes. I don't think he will. I think he realises that. So he's suggested as a possible, why not John Bercow, who's a moderate, centre, intelligent, articulate, compassionate politician, who I think would command the majority of the House, who is stepping down as Speaker. He could step down as Speaker into the role as Prime Minister, temporarily, of a national government of unity. I think the nation would sigh a huge sigh of relief if that happened. I would vote for him myself. And he doesn't, I don't think, need to join a party. John Bercow is his own man, an independent. And then I think that temporary Prime Minister, and Corbyn has said he would be accepting of John Bercow. I think this is a brilliant idea. He would then call a second referendum. That's the first thing. And then once the results of that are known, then a general election. That, I think, would be the way to proceed. To do it the other way around, like a general election first, is silly. That doesn't solve anything because the parties are all split and torn up about Brexit. And they don't have, it would become a general election totally dominated by that one issue. No, we need a second referendum first. Now all the facts are there, we know what it's about, we know what the nightmare scenario is. I think actually that the choice really is that England, I think there are increasing numbers of people in Wales who don't want Brexit. There have always been a majority in Northern Ireland and Scotland who don't. I think there's now a majority in Wales. I actually think there's now a majority of English people, sensible, decent, good English people that are against Brexit as well. So I think there would be a victory for Bremain. But if the English still voted for their Brexit fantasy, then I think they should leave the UK as well as the European Union. I think Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, if they voted for Bremain, they should keep the UK, the label, and also all the archives and the intelligence records of what British intelligence have been naughtily up to behind the scenes in the last 50 years. I'd like to see those, thank you. And I think the UK Parliament should then migrate to share peripatetically between Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. And the English can do their own thing. Let the English go off and do whatever they want. They can become the 55th state of the US if that's what they want. I don't think that's going to happen. My faith in my ancestors, my mother's side were Yorkshire people, my father was Irish, English. My English ancestors are turning in their graves against Brexit and the narrowness that it represents. I only have an education because my forebears were forward-looking internationalists. They travelled, they studied, they sent my mother to University of London. They went to night school to learn to become a management expert, as my father did. And, you know, I'm an inheritor of that rich cultural tradition that the English managed to achieve. I don't want it to be lost for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and for all the millions of people that you know, want a better future and want more hope in their lives, for all the young graduates and so on that are coming out of our English universities. No, we want that freedom to roam. We want Europe to be reconfirmed as our home, you know. So look, that's what I wanted to say. There's so much more I'd like to say, but this week is going to be very interesting. I'm going to be watching developments like a hawk, and I'm going to be watching the Queen's wardrobe particularly, see any subtle signs of dissent. But may the gods protect this, you know, this process. May they watch over my beloved country of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the whole of Europe. And may we find a way to bring the wisdom that the Zohar talks about, this higher level of Keter, down into the, you know, the ordinary everyday lives of people. May we find a way to solve the economic and ethnic and religious conflicts that are going on the planet, and find a wisdom that can guide us all. And Michael Scott is certainly not in hell. I'm sorry about that. He's, I think, in the Heavenly Library, which is where I belong. And one of the many sages in my Book of Saints and Sages that is, I think, you know, trying to get through to us in incarnation at the moment that Brexit is a really silly idea. Let's just do Bremain, okay? So thank you so much, and blessings, and have a great week.